The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Glory to you. On that day, Jesus went out of the house and sat down by the sea. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat down, and the whole crowd stood along the shore. And he spoke to them at length in parables, saying, "A sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seed fell on the path, and birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky ground where it had little soil. It sprang up at once because the soil was not deep. And when the sun rose, it was scorched, and it withered for lack of roots. Some seed fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it. But some seed fell on rich soil and produced fruit, 100 or 60 or 30-fold. Whoever has ears ought to hear." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Parables come alive in the most unexpected ways. Today I am reminded of the time when I told the parable of the farmer and the seeds to first graders at the parish school of my last assignment in Texas. When I was done, there was a chilling silence, only to be broken by the comment of a curious and sharp 6-year-old. "Father, I do not understand." Before I went off tangent, I asked for some clarification. "What part of the reading is confusing to you?" "Father," he said, "why would a farmer be so careless? Did he not know that his seed bag had big holes? He was scattering the seeds everywhere. My parents' father would call it wasteful, very wasteful." And the child was right, not that the bag had big holes, but that the farmer, the sower, seems to be wasting away valuable seeds. Nonetheless, Jesus uses 4 examples of sowing seeds to address what was going on during his ministry. You see, most of the hearers of Jesus' teachings were not accepting what he was bringing to them, and many of them fervently opposed his message. But there were a few who were willing to hear what he had to say, and to these he promised a reward, the fruit that comes when the seeds get to finally sprout. In the Gospel of Matthew, the fruit was the promise of the glory of God that comes from a deeper knowledge of who Jesus is, and a more spirited participation in the reign of God that Jesus established. The parable of the sower and the seed appears in 3 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and in Matthew it was quite longer. Today we heard the condensed version of the Gospel. It showed that the community to whom Matthew was preaching was experiencing similar questions we may have today, wondering why there were so many not willing to commit to the message of Christ. So Matthew elaborates the explanation of the sowing of the seeds to reflect the early church experience of his community. There were those who never took their faith seriously, others who started well but soon lost interest and became indifferent, others who were overwhelmed by worldly concerns, and lastly, those who flourished in their faith. Now, before we start categorizing others into 4 patterns, it is better to see them as different phases in our own journey of faith, to see them as periods of growing pains, lessons that can serve others as a good witness in our efforts to pass on the faith. I have not always given my all in sharing my faith in words and actions. There were times when it felt more like going through the motions, praying without intentionality and meaning. And there was a time in grad school in Louisville when I alienated myself from the church. I went to Mass only when I was visiting home in Belize. And I guess they're probably seeing this and wondering. There was a time when I was consumed with future plans, how to make more money, how to further my studies, how to be someone in life based on success, on what others say about me, or based on my possessions. Yes, these were times of great tests, struggles and confusion, but as I look back, these were the times of greatest growth in my awareness of the people who never gave up on me, people who witness to the ever-present and patient God waiting for us and giving us the courage to return to Him. Having said this, we must emphasize the major point of the parable. And this is where the first grader of my former parish gets it. What seems to us as a wasteful and careless farmer is reflective of a God whose generosity is boundless, who never gives up on us, who continues showering blessings without counting the costs, still present even when we were not receptive to His word or were oblivious to God's actions through others in our lives. For those who may be tempted to become disheartened when others, especially loved ones, are not practicing their faith, are indifferent to religion, or are seeking things that ultimately do not satisfy, today's readings come as a sweet reminder that our generous God sows seeds everywhere, every time, and that His word shall not return to Him void, but shall do His will, achieving the end for which God sent it. Today, Jesus invites us to imitate God the Father by being more careless in sowing the seeds of faith, hope, and charity through our witness in words and actions, to be overly generous in sharing with others how God has and continues to work in our lives. And this could be done by everyone, from grandparents to parents to friends, We lose nothing by sharing with others the goodness of how God continues working in our lives. Faith is not imposed, but is passed on through attraction. After all, it is God's seeds, God's soil, and God's work through us. God works in mysterious ways, so don't give up on yourselves or others too easily. Keep on sowing seeds carelessly and patiently and lovingly, hoping that someday they fall on fertile soil and produce fruit for the greater glory of God. Amen.